Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to you from us all at British Isles Living Values Education for our enthralling webinar that will touch everyone's heart, a new way of learning inspired by nature. My name is Peter, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you our guest speaker for this evening, Mr. Richard Dunne. Richard is Director of Education for the unique and innovative Harmony Project that inspires children to learn through nature. And Richard carries with him over 30 years of experience of working with children, most recently as head teacher of an Ofsted graded outstanding school for 18 years. He's passionate about motivating and inspiring children to understand firsthand about nature and how nature's harmonious principles teach us how to live sustainably. So I, for one, as a lover of nature, I'm looking forward to hearing Richard's presentation, as I'm sure we all are too. Should you have any questions, please add them to the chat box in the usual way. So Richard, thank you for sharing this evening. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Peter. It's a great pleasure to be with you all this evening, and I hope that what I share is both informative and inspiring. And I have lots of slides and images of the work of the Harmony Project, and there will be time at the end when we can open it up into a conversation, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your both observations and questions around what I share today. So we're talking today about harmony and this new way of learning. Of course, it's not necessarily a new way of learning, but it is a new way of looking at learning in the 21st century. And it feels as if it's a very important message, bearing in mind all the challenges that we're facing right now, from climate change to biodiversity loss to the global pandemic and so many issues around mental health as well. So what I will share with you will be an explanation of these principles, which were drawn out of a book written by the Prince of Wales about 12 years ago now. And I was saying just before we began this presentation that he intuitively knew he had to write this book. He had been thinking about these ideas, these messages, these principles for a long time. And he wanted to show the importance of them, as it says in this quote, to the health of the human condition and to the sustainability of the natural world upon which our human condition depends. That we had reached a point of separation where we saw ourselves as separate from the natural world, and we were living in a way that was really not understanding the impact we were having. Of course, now we are fully aware of the consequences of that. So from his book, I made lots of notes. I wrote to him and I said, your message is not being heard in education. And over a number of years, I worked on distilling his message down to some principles that children and young people, to be honest, anyone could understand about this idea of harmony. And this idea of harmony being about wholeness, health, relationships, and the interdependence of all life, that we cannot see things separately. We must understand things in relationship one to the other. And of course, a lot of traditions, indigenous peoples and cultures have always understood this. So how can we bring that back to the heart of the learning process? So as I said at the beginning, it feels like harmony right now is a really important message. And certainly with the work that I'm doing out in the world is resonating very strongly with people, because I think they see it as not just a way of learning. Of course, what I'm going to share today has a strong education focus around schools, but it's really a philosophy for life that all of us can reference and adopt. It's based on principles we see at work in nature that help us to live sustainably. And if we look at it from a learning perspective, it just makes learning make sense. It's got a coherence and a depth to it. And all the time, it's about applying our understanding and our knowledge to real life issues. And my concern generally in education is that we are not taking the message of our learning out into the world. We're not connecting it to the reality of what we're seeing. So it's in effect teaching us a new way of learning to live. And from a school perspective, I believe it is about making schools not just outstanding, but stand out, to do something that really shows the quality of the provision they provide. So this is a lovely quote. It came from a man called Jim Garrison, who runs an online university called Ubiquity University. And he says, if we don't start with the fundamental principles of life, we will go astray. And he highlights the need for us now to really help all of us understand these principles. They're not difficult principles to grasp, but if we don't understand them, we will live in a flawed way. And that's in effect what we have done and why we have created the problems that we face. I spoke with someone in China today, and he said that the government there wants an education revolution. And they want an education revolution based on an ecological civilization. That's a very strong statement, and they're right. We absolutely now need to be working with nature, seeing ourselves as part of nature, and then understanding how we create healthy systems. So I'll just run through these principles of harmony with you. I'll give you some examples of education, and they're examples that can be applied both in an educational schools context, but of course in many other contexts too. So the first principle is this principle of interdependence. I mentioned earlier this understanding of everything being connected. We only have to look at our own bodies and how they work together, our mind and body working together, our spirit, our mind and our body working together, to understand that life is wholly interconnected. And if we look at the world of bees and we understand how bee colonies and the ecosystem that they are part of is an interconnected system, then we understand systems at work. Now, if young people grow up with a systems view of life, they will understand things very differently from learning about subjects in silos, which is what we do all over the world, with a few enlightened exceptions. So this understanding of bees in relationship to one another and in relationship to a wider ecosystem where they're pollinating flowers and taking the nectar back to their hive or their colony is a brilliant example of how this interdependent principle works. And we can share it in lots of different ways and help people, young people, see this idea of interdependence at work in, as I say, lots of different contexts. So bees teach us the systemic nature of all life. And we see that as much as there's competition in nature, there's also collaboration. In fact, we're learning more and more. There's a brilliant book, isn't there, called The Secret Life of Trees, which is telling us that there's an awful lot we have still to understand about this incredible interconnected world. So to give you an example in a school's context, and these are taken from a primary school, here are a number of different examples from community and people who help us in community to different ecosystems from seasides to oceans, and really building this understanding of the joined upness of life. So if children get this message, as I said just now, they will see the world through the lens of systems. So what we do in developing this approach to learning is we take a big question, we frame a project around the question. In this case, why are bees so brilliant? We have a principle of harmony, and we have a great work celebration. On the left here, you can see a little hexagonal book, which is a book that contains lots of fascinating information about bees, how they work together in their system. So it's a lovely way for children to learn. And in effect, the planning of it is back to front. We say, let's take the project first, and let's feed in the subject skills and knowledge to that project. It's not difficult to do We just have to have a different mindset at the start. What for me is lovely in this approach is, and these are quotes from children in primary school, is that they understand the world in a different way. So they see at the bottom that ecosystems teach us interdependence. They understand that interdependence means that everything and everyone has a role to play. These are profound statements from children between the ages of 4 and 11. So if they grow into the world thinking like this, then they will start to develop practices which are ultimately sustainable. The second principle is this principle of the cycle, and understanding that nature's cycles are self-sustaining, self-regulating, self-limiting. They don't have anyone telling them what to do. They intuitively, instinctively do it. And I was talking with someone today about the fact that we feel like we've got to constantly tell in education, judge in education, sometimes point fingers. It's quite a critical system. And yet we all know ourselves personally that we flourish when we're given opportunities and guidance to really flourish in what we do. So cycles are obviously models of sustainability. They go on forever. So how can we create cyclical systems? If we take food growing, starting with the seed, planting a seed in the ground, and then having that magical moment where we pull that those vegetables, the onions or the fruit off the tree, and we see the fruit of our labors. And of course, that's not the end of the process, because we then take our food waste, we recycle it, compost it back onto the ground, and we start the growing system again. It's a bit of a smelly process, but it does enable the richness of all that, that breaking down of matter to go back into the soil. And you all know this. And when children know this, they see the value of cycles, and they challenge anything that that doesn't work in that way. This is a lovely poem written by a wonderful poet and writer called Robert Macfarlane. A number of you may know him. And it's from a book called The Lost Words, talking about the things that have come out of the dictionary as terms of nature that we have they proposed taking out of the dictionary because they said they weren't being used anymore. And he said, well, that's a damning indictment of our disconnection with nature. So let's have a campaign to get them back into the dictionary and make sure we use them. But this idea of learning through the seasons, seeing how things change, there's a constant process of change, important for cycles. So we're still in winter, although I went out for a run just now and I thought it's feeling remarkably mild, almost warm. And in England right now, we're still in early February, but it definitely felt as if spring was on its way. So we've got projects here which build on this understanding of cycles, what happens at each stage of a cycle, and how can they inform what we would call now a circular bioeconomy. And people like Dame Ellen MacArthur, who did that amazing journey around the world in her yacht, are really championing this cause of the circular economy. As we know, and these are beaches in the Maldives covered in rubbish, many of our systems are not cyclical, they're linear, and they cause a lot of problems. They're degrading and damaging our world. The third principle is this principle of diversity and biodiversity. There's a document out in this country right now, put out by the Department for Education on sustainability and climate change. And one of the major recommendations in this document is that children need to be experts in biodiversity. Now, they'll only do that by getting out into nature, by seeing these beautiful butterflies or whatever species it is for real, and then learning the names, learning about them. And when they do that, they'll start to care. So I am encouraged at last that the Department for Education is seriously looking at how to get children out of the classroom more so that they connect to nature and appreciate it and its awe and wonder. As we know, in any system of nature, its diversity, its biodiversity is what enables it to be so resilient. So we see diversity as equaling resilience, whether it's in an organization, a school, a business, and a community, but also in the natural world. Biodiversity is essential to the well-being of a system. So how can we plant fruit trees here? These are cherries with lots of different species, and then get our young people to start to identify not just the names of the different trees, but the tastes of the different fruits, and to develop a taste palette that starts to appreciate the richness of life. If we're growing food, the more we grow in diversity, the more we'll enjoy, or are likely to enjoy, the food that we eat. And interestingly, people sometimes say, but children often are not very adventurous with their food, and that's probably true. But if they've grown that food and they've then tasted it out of the ground or off a tree, they're more likely to want to give it a go than if it's been given to them on a plate. And of course, this extraordinary diversity in us, which we're only just beginning to really understand, the neurodiversity, the spectrum from autism to Asperger's to all sorts of different, what we call as needs, but actually we're realizing that they can bring so much, so many new dimensions to what we do, which maybe we hadn't seen and maybe appreciated before. So the diversity of us and having a diverse curriculum of learning is going to be really key in our future. So projects of learning here that promote this idea of diversity and ultimately celebrate it are key to understanding the importance of diversity in the world. So I just wanted to give you a quick example. This is a project that we are currently working on with the Eden Project in Cornwall. If you've been, you know they have these incredible biomes where they have a rainforest. So we have developed a project of learning celebrating the biodiversity of the rainforest. This is how we set out the learning. We've got a 6-week program, key questions at the beginning of each week. And if you look at the blue column, that's the week 3 learning, but it should, as far as possible, link together. If you look at the green row, we've got the science learning there, but indeed lots of different subject learning flowing one to the next, building understanding. So this is not an alternative to mainstream education. It's a way of delivering it in a better way. And now what we're doing is we're developing educational materials. So this is a unit of learning on poetry around the rainforest. Here are some graphs and charts looking at rainfall and temperature in different parts of the world linked to the rainforest. And what this is doing is it's bringing the learning to life. So it's not a photocopied worksheet out of a scheme. It's some real life examples that children can analyze and understand. And we're developing some beautiful artwork as well, which have instructions to go with them, so children can learn a little bit more about these amazing rainforest creatures. The fourth principle is this principle of adaptation. And my goodness, haven't we had to understand adaptation in our own lives over the last 2 years or so during the pandemic? And we see in nature these extraordinary adaptations to place. And so this aspect of the learning does 2 things. One, it helps us to appreciate that if we look at species in nature, this remarkable frog and the way it blends into that rock, the way it can spring away from a predator trying to catch it and get away, its evolutionary processes enable it to work where it is. So there's an awful lot of work now that is going on around biomimicry, understanding the brilliant designs of nature. And I'm working with a fascinating professor of biomimicry at the moment, who is looking at how we can learn to imitate these designs and use them in our own designs in the human world. So that's one element of it. And here, if we look at the hexagons of the bee honeycomb, and then we look at the biome of Eden that I just referenced just now, we can see how we've taken a design of nature and we've used it to create a robust structure. But the other element is this idea of context of learning, adapting learning to its place. I have a concern that a lot of young people learn about stuff that is so disconnected from their world that it has very little meaning for them. And yet the more we can connect their learning to where they come from, their communities, their landscapes, their geography and history, the more it makes sense to them. This is a lovely project linked to the Second World War in a Dig for Victory inquiry, and the children have made seasonal soups and they're sharing them with the elders within their community, some of whom lived through the Second World War. So a really nice intergenerational project of learning. A lot of our learning is still very backward looking. This is Henry VIII, just down the road from me here where I live, and the palace there at Hampton Court. But what our young people are asking for is a learning that is more future focused. In fact, there is in England and the home nations, there is an organization now, a secondary school student-based organization called Teach the Future. And they're saying, we want to get a better balance between learning from the past and learning into the future. So how do we get that balance right? As I mentioned just now, thinking about adaptation in terms of our own lives, the places we live, particular periods of history and how people adapted to the situations they were in, and of course, understanding the adaptations of nature. I think this final point is an important one, this idea of community. If we want to build community, we need our young people to have a relationship with their community. And if we shut off what happens in a school from what happens beyond it, we're less likely to engender that sense of community in our young people. Fifth principle is this principle of health. So we all know how important health is in our lives, and understanding health in lots of different ways is a central ingredient to all of us learning how to live in a healthy sense of well-being. So these different forms of health really key to our children's education. This is an expedition to Chamonix in the Alps. We may even be running one again this year, COVID permitting. And the children, the students, learn three things. First of all, what do I need to be well? And beyond base requirements, needing to have food, to be safe and secure, to have a home. The other thing that they really want is a realization of themselves. They want to be valued, coming back to the values culture. They want to stand up for what they believe in. They want to care. They want to be creative and connect to nature. And they want still time to think, reflect, pray, meditate, be mindful, moments where they're not just doing, but they're learning how to be. If you look at that in the context of a team and trekking in the mountains, when it's not easy, what does a team need to be well? Well, a team needs everyone to have a voice, everyone to have a say. It needs this communication, the right pace. It needs a sense of awareness that where there's a need, how am I going to respond to it? And I've always marveled at these quotes because this is 11-year-old children identifying how to ensure any team or organization works well. And if they take that into their adult lives, they'll do a good job. And of course, there's this perspective of the world. We all know right now how important it is to get planetary health right. And this is a blueprint from 11-year-olds. If we have all of these things in place, then we'll be doing pretty well. I like the fact that they see themselves as leaders as well. Their role as leaders is an essential part of creating that sustainable future. So projects of learning that start with projects around play and travel and my body and the food that I eat and leadership is a very interesting way of understanding health, all the different dimensions. So I want to tell you about this campaign. It's called the Nature Premium, and it's going to be launched within the next week. And it's running alongside what I mentioned earlier around a sustainability and climate change draft strategy for children to be given access to nature-based learning. So the campaign is saying, if the government want to deliver on that promise, they need to fund schools to either skill themselves up to deliver this kind of learning, because many teachers don't have that skill set, or bring people in from associated organizations who can support it, or look at taking children out to residentials on day trips to have this greater connection with nature. And we all know from our own lives that the more we connect to the natural world, the more it matters to us, the more we're engaged with it. So we hope that the Nature Premium can be a solution to the big vision, I think, that the government now has for this. The final principle of the 6 in a school is, in a school setting where you may have 6 terms over a year, is this principle of oneness. Seeing and understanding that we are nature, we are at one with the world, and giving children a sense of their place and their peace in the world. It's lovely that the word place and the word peace are the same word. When we find our place, we find our peace. These students are in Ladakh in northern India, and every morning they have a time of meditation, and it's the most wonderful way to set up their day of learning, to have these moments just to be. And it's becoming more and more popular around the world that students are given time for contemplation, prayer, meditation. So that sense of one as an individual, the oneness of us all, and a community of love. So when we look at this principle, we can look at it in terms of civilizations that understood their place in the greater cosmos. We can look at it in terms of being part of a world that we all contribute to and are responsible for. And we can look at it in terms of our nature and our peace. Again, just to give you some quotes from children, they understand that oneness is living in harmony with everyone and everything. Oneness is being at one with nature. I want to just share this final principle with you, which is the principle of geometry, because the Prince of Wales was very clear that if we want to understand harmony, we have to see that there is a geometry, what he would call a sacred geometry, to life. So if we look at this berry in the winter and it has a pentagon shape, we can see that shape in many forms in nature. This is a cross section of a carrot, which also has a pentagon shape. Sometimes it's a circle and others it's a pentagon. I don't know if you know this image. It's a remarkable image of the orbit of Earth and Venus around the sun. And if you know your Fibonacci sequence of numbers, you have 5 petals in this orbiting geometry. And it takes 8 Earth years and 13 years in Venus terms to create this shape. So you have the numbers 5, 8, and 13, all numbers in the sequence that create this remarkable pattern in the solar system. And it's the same pattern as a tiny flower in a garden in summer. So at a micro level and a macro level, there's this extraordinary sense of geometry. This is a starfish in the ocean, same idea, same shape, same pattern. And if we look at another example, one that you'll know, the Fibonacci spiral, which uses those number sequences, we can see it in a curled up fern and a shell. And then we can see it in the macro form in a cloud formation, even in the cosmos and the galaxies of the stars, and in our curled up finger. And if you were to look at your curled up index finger right now, it has the same proportionality as these other elements in nature. So when we understand this, and when children understand this, they really appreciate that we are not separate from the world. We are an integral part of it. And it's therefore our responsibility to look after it. I thought you might be interested in some of these observations on geometry, that when children, but to be honest, when anyone does geometry, it's developing fine motor skills, good concentration, attention to detail, and this lovely calmness. That is the Cosmati pavement. It's where the kings and queens of England have their coronation in Westminster Abbey, and that was recreated by the Prince's School of Traditional Arts with 8 and 9-year-old children. And it's absolutely stunning. It's the order of the solar system. And it was created when Pluto was the 9th planet, which is why there are 9 planets, or 9 circles representing the 9 planets of the system. I don't know if you know someone called Fritjof Capra. He's written an amazing book called The Systems View of Life. And he says here, from a systems point of view, the understanding of life begins with the understanding of pattern. So it's a lovely dimension to this work that we're promoting. So harmony is when everything works together. All these different principles are drawn out to explore individually, but ultimately they're all one and the same thing. I just wanted to give you, in the final slides, just a sense of how this works in a school context. So we have here 6 half terms, and every half term looks at a different principle with the geometry running through everything. And then we have these inquiry questions and a sustainability project or goal. So all the time taking a harmony principle and applying it to a sustainable practice. And the order, this is a different year group, the order can change. We can have different principles at different times, and we can feed them into the obvious time in the year for the project to be run. So if you're learning about the solar systems, now is a good time, the middle of winter when it's dark. If it's summertime, children are unlikely to see the solar system or any planet with such light skies. So what we do is we take those projects, we put them into this format, and we have, as you can see along the top, a question for each week. We've got the inquiry question, the principle, and the great work celebration, which I'll mention in just a moment. And we've now introduced sustainable development goals so that there is a reference to that too. So this is a lovely project we've just done with Resurgence magazine, supporting that last project on rivers and providing materials for schools on river systems, and some lovely examples of children at the end of that inquiry understanding that cycles have no beginning or no end. They go on and on and on. This is an oceans inquiry. So once they've done rivers, they flow into the ocean and they build their understanding, this time of interdependence. The last one was the cycle and the water cycle. And they usually are seeing that there is the system growing and growing and growing and working together. And then we as humans have in some way damaged it or degraded it. So how are we going to heal the natural world and make it better? So some lovely artwork just to support that. That's actually linked to mangroves on the coastal regions of Costa Rica. We can use this idea again with ancient civilizations. Many schools around the world will be looking back at the ancient civilizations, and we can understand how they got this really strong message of oneness. So if you take a primary school as an example, you have 7 year groups and you have 6 half terms of projects. So they're building their understanding over 42 inquiries and 42 inquiries linked to principles of harmony. And at the end of every project, there is a celebration, something that the children, the students do within their school, with their parents, out in the community, that brings that learning to life and gives it a real purpose. I have often had a concern that children just see their outcome of learning as a test or an assessment, when actually what a wonderful way to celebrate their learning if they have great works that are memorable and give them opportunities to share and to shine in their learning. So my belief, and it's inspired by the Prince very much, is that these principles of harmony can teach us what we need to do to create a sustainable future. And as you can see on the left-hand side of the book, and the book is right here, these statements, which are at the back of this book, help us to see how we can learn to live and live sustainably. So we need to work systemically, think in cycles, value and celebrate diversity, focus on where we are, on the locality, see the global picture, but focus on the local. Understand what it means to live well, see that we are nature, take time for our inner life as well as our outer action, and then take action. And if we get that balance, and harmony ultimately is about balance, then we should live well together and with nature. So here's a lovely quote. We need to be asking not what sort of planet we are leaving our children, but what sort of children we are leaving our planet. And my strong belief is that, as it says at the beginning of the Prince's book, Harmony, we need a revolution. And I don't by that mean something dramatic and violent. I mean something about re-evolving. We need to think again about how we are educating and what we are educating for, and reframe that learning according to these principles of harmony. So if you want to find out a little bit more about our work, there's our website, theharmonyproject.org.uk. We're becoming increasingly active on social media. So we have a LinkedIn account, and we're on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and so on. So please do follow us if you're interested in our work. And for me, I think what's very interesting now is how this work is developing in partnership. So a lot of my work now is with Eden International around the world, and we are seeing opportunities to build these partnerships with different people. The Prince's Foundation and the Prince of Wales, of course, very much at the heart of that. So let me just come out and stop sharing. And we're just about on 40 minutes. So we've got a little bit of time for some questions and to hear your observations and to hear your thoughts.
From me to you, Richard. Can you hear me?
I can.
That was just absolutely amazing, innovatory, and we need it. Our world needs it. So from me to you, on behalf of everyone, congratulations and thank you so much for sharing those beautiful insights and inspirations for us all. It was truly enthralling.
Thank you.
I don't want to hug all these conversations. Let's go to Gladstone.
Gladstone's put the hands up for the clap.
I was like clapping hands. Thank you very much for the inspirational talk, and yeah, provokes a lot of thinking about what we are doing and how things can be improved. I've learned a lot from your presentation, and I was just thinking at the back of my mind that if children are being given this rich experience in schools, how can that be continued in the higher education sector or in further education? So that was my question for you, Richard, to see what's the thinking, what's the planning about establishing a link between what's going on in the schools and in the higher education sector.
It's a very good question, and I've often been asked, because that program is at primary education level, so we're not even going into secondary at the moment. So as you say, how do you then take it on into tertiary? I think at tertiary, there are opportunities now to deliver something quite similar to that, but as a module. that runs alongside the focus that students may have for their course. So they may have an engineering course that they're studying for, or an IT course, or an English course. But if they are able to also do a module of learning that draws out on these different elements of principles and practices around harmony, around sustainability, then I think that's the way forward. It's certainly something that we're now looking at. And I'm working with a number of different organizations, such as the University of Wales, which is a harmony university. And the University of Wales is very keen to make sure that the students there, many of whom are international students, understand the message, their message of harmony. Interestingly, there's some work in the Netherlands right now that is exploring the same idea. How can we help students to embrace this understanding? And a lot of them want to do it. I think it's very much pushing at an open door. So yes, we need to keep being creative around how we can make it happen. But I'm sure there are ways. So fingers crossed we can make it.
Yeah, thank you very much. And one of the principles, like the principle of diversity, I think informs a lot of the work that universities are beginning to engage with in terms of decolonizing the curriculum, trying to bring in this notion of diversifying and enriching the curriculum. So your work has got a lot of impact on what the universities are actually trying to achieve now. And I think, yeah, we need to see you probably establishing partnerships with a lot of these higher education institutions and making sure that these principles, all of them, come in and, you know, get embedded in our curriculum.
Well,
thank you very much.
Thank you for saying that, Gladson. And I think you're absolutely right. We are really challenging a lot of the status quo on things right now. We're saying, is this good enough? Do we need to think again? And diversity is absolutely at the center of that work. I am chair of the board of a charity called SOS UK. And SOS UK is Students Organising for Sustainability. So it is tertiary education students. And I am fascinated by the work that SOS is doing. And on the board, there are only 5 of us. We have the present president of the National Union of Students and the past president of the National Union of Students. And they both have Black African heritage, and they're both wonderful people and so interesting in their observations on the things that you're highlighting. So it's very healthy for all of us to be engaging in these conversations. And you're absolutely right. We need to keep going because there's still more work to do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any questions, observations from any of the beautiful gathering here this evening?
Helen.
Yes, well, thank you, Richard. That was just wonderful to listen to your presentation. And I'm coming mostly from secondary school background, but also as part of the Living Values movement, I could say, for about more than 25 years. And your approach ties in so much with the holistic approach that Living Values puts forward, and particularly an experiential approach. And all that you've been saying is about young people experiencing harmony, experiencing nature, which is so different from the classic curriculum of learning about all of these things and memorizing them. And so I'm seeing so many parallels with the Living Values approach, and just wondering how perhaps we can form some sort of partnership. And another question I was going to ask, do you actually have training modules for teachers and courses, etc.?
Well, thank you for your questions, Helen. I must reassure you that, and I'm delighted that Nigel is here this evening, that values-based education and the Harmony Project are working very closely together.
Right.
And when I was a head teacher, my first year as a head teacher was inspired by Neil Hawkes's book, A Quiet Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing I did as a head was to introduce values. And you're absolutely right that the work of values and the work of harmony really go hand in hand. So that is very much happening. And we, I think, and Nigel, I'm sure he's going to nod at this point, we can see that partnership becoming stronger. And we're really looking now at how we can develop it further. In answer to your question about training, yes, that is also something that we're doing. So we're working with a number of values-based schools actually at the moment on a series of workshops to explore this learning in more detail and to give teachers and educators opportunities to really see how this can work for them. So it's all very well listening to a presentation, but the translation is obviously into their own practices. So we've run a series of sessions with them, and they've been really informative, both for them and indeed for us. So yes, that's very much part of what we do.
Wonderful. Well, wishing you all the very best. I mean, this is just fantastic what you've been explaining to us. Absolutely wonderful.
Thank you, Helen. I think the other thing I would say is that what we're realizing now is that what began in effect in a primary school is now working in the primary sector, starting to move into the secondary sector. It has references, as we've just discussed, in tertiary. And some of our most interesting work now is in prisons, because often people who've been in prison have had a very bad experience of education. And so this way of learning, which is nature-based and different, is a nice, it's kind of a gentle way for them to learn. It doesn't remind them too much, we hope, of being back in the classroom with something that they found particularly maybe uninspiring. So it's got lots of different permutations. And I think for me, the richness of the work is to see how it can be adapted and applied in different contexts.
And just another question. Has it spread in different countries? Well, you mentioned China, but has it spread further afield yet? Or do you have plans for the project to spread out there?
Well, this book has now, as of this week, just been translated into its 8th language. So it's in Chinese, Japanese, French, Spanish, Italian, Welsh, English, and Ukrainian. And our latest project is working in the Ukraine, in Chernobyl. And we're looking at a project from tragedy to trauma to healing to health. So next week, I'm meeting with a number of teachers in Kiev online to explore this first project of learning based around this approach of harmony. So yeah, so it's really interesting. We're speaking, I've just recorded today a message for the Costa Rican education minister to thank him for his support of this work in Costa Rica.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I was thinking it's so different to the kind of education that I had. And I was feeling quite jealous, actually, the children. But also I was thinking, gosh, you know, if we'd had this like 25 years ago, the world would be, well, such a different place. You know, it's so powerful. It's so important just to know those simple principles and apply them. And isn't it crazy, really, that they've just escaped our notice? You know, they're so fundamental. And it's amazing that, you know, it's taken this long, really, to take these principles from nature and apply them and understand that, you know, we're also part of nature and that we can all benefit from it. It's just shows what's been going on.
It really does, doesn't it? It shows this incredible disconnect that we have had. And as you say, they're not difficult. If I'd asked you at the beginning to write down a list of principles of nature, you may well have come up with quite a few of them. They're things that we kind of know, but have forgotten.
Yeah.
And yes, if we had started doing this 25 years ago, if not more, we would be in a much better place. But there is that cyclical element. We seem to be coming back to it. And my hope is that the momentum will build. I mean, we're all seeing, aren't we, that a lot of people in the world are saying, hang on a minute, we've got to heal, we've got to restore, we've got to regenerate, we've got to make things better. And so there is definitely a big momentum going on right now to do that. And I think this can hopefully support it on its way.
There are some secrets, Richard, in your program. And I think one of the biggest secrets is that you are speaking to the heart. And you're inviting everyone to contribute from their heart.
Yes.
And I love it. I love it with all the planning you have there. Our partners in learning are. And that begins the dialogue to bring this heart back to life again. Because you mentioned Prince Charles at the very, very beginning there. And he had a quote about intuition somewhere, and I'll try to remember what it is. And he was saying that the intuitive element being educated out in favor of the logic.
Yes.
And the logic's going nowhere, it's going linear.
The
heart is cyclical. The heart knows its truth. With living values education, it's nothing new. It's just bringing out what's already there. And there are so many elements within these principles that are resonating with me, and I'm sure will resonate with many educators globally, because we all feel it. And it's the heart that feels. The head knows, but the heart feels it has to make a difference. So I've got a funny feeling, Rich, we're going to hear a lot more of you. Whether you like it or not.
Well, it's really lovely you say that, Peter, because I think, well, you are absolutely right. And these are truths. And as you've just said, truths resonate with people. So it's never difficult to share this message, because it's just, and it's not about me, it's about the message. It's about what this is saying to us. And I remember working with a lovely group of teachers in Bhutan, and they said, one of them said at the end of the day, with tears in his, I mean, literally streaming down his face, he said, I have worked in education for many, many years, and today I understand what education is about. And he'd always, I sensed, been frustrated by his role in his work. And suddenly it all sort of came out. It was a release for him. So yes, we must be true to this work and true to ourselves in what we do. And I love your reference to the heart, because it's absolutely about that.
I always like to offer something to put out there generally, but you said one line, it really grabbed me. And it's, when you find your place, we find our peace. And in our peace is our intuition. We know what's right and true. And you mentioned about the benefit of youngsters. You mentioned North India there, where the kids have meditation or mindfulness, one slide there. And what we're doing with the kids here in Kuwait, we have each day, we have what's called peace time, where we stop everything and we just enjoy quiet music. And we call it deep. Drop everything, enjoy peace. And they love it. And the secret is the teachers love it more.
Gives them a break.
Because we're just getting back to who we are.
Yeah.
And could you share a little bit more about this vision in China? I'm really fascinated by this vision for an ecological revolution.
Well, I think they have moved very fast into the 21st century. They've built an extraordinary amount of things, and their city, what's the figure? They have something like 300 cities with over 10 million people in them. 300. It's extraordinary. And I'm thinking about the maths here. I don't know if that's exactly right, but there's a lot of them. And they are realizing that what they're doing is completely unsustainable. It just can't go on like that. And so they are thinking very deeply, and I think a lot going back to their Taoist tradition. And they're saying, actually, we need to reconnect to to nature. So this is now the driving force of their vision. And their vision, unlike here, their vision is for 50 years. Mm-hmm. So they've got models of the vision of what they want to see for 50 years down the line. It's extraordinary. And it's very much about the health and well-being of the world, and of course of their place in that world. So there's a lot of work to do. A lot of the systems there, like in other places in the world, are very damaging and degrading and polluting. But they certainly now have a big commitment to make it happen. And I think what's interesting in relation to your comment about this work and how it can support others is that they don't have the content to make it work yet. So they're saying to me, content is king, and we need the content and the sort of things that you're sharing. So yes, I think it's likely that this message in a really positive way can be applied and adapted to their world and help them to get where they want to be.
So they'll come to live their heart, live their value.
Yes.
And another, got so many rich quotes today. My mind is sort of full. Let me say, what's he talking about? You know, and it's a quote about what sort of children are we leaving for the future? Who are we creating? You're not leaving it for them. What are we creating? And it's an education for the future. And I do love that.
We need that, don't we? They will tell us, many of them, that they want to be part of that. They want to be leading that. So we need to shift the focus. I remember someone saying the greatest barrier to really good education is the talking teacher who talks too much and doesn't engage enough. So how do we turn that around?
One of the joys you mentioned, I'm sorry, I'm hogging all the conversation here, but it's the last thing I will share. I'm mindful that indigenous languages are being lost globally. And where there were 8,000 languages maybe 50 years ago, we're down to about 800 now. And what we're losing there, you mentioned this about the root meaning of words. Like the German word Menschlichkeit, its man's relationship with the environment is one word. And we're losing these nuggets, we're losing these, this intuitive knowing that sometimes language can't express. And so I wish you well with that program to understand root meanings of words. And it helped. Please, Richard.
Well, just on that, Peter, I'm working with a lovely group in Greece, and they said, Richard, there is one principle missing. It's the principle of logos and language, because this is a language that we need to learn, and we can learn it in lots of different ways. And your reference to the cultures and traditions that can give us new perspectives is so enriching. And my hope is that as we are starting to realize the damage we're doing to biodiversity, and we change that, we will also realize alongside that, that it's also about the cultures and the peoples and the ways of seeing the perspectives that they bring that we need to restore as well.
There's a lot of ancient wisdom in Greece, and I must chip in here that I'm actually working with a lot of Greek people at the moment. So there's another parallel coming in here. Ah, so brilliant. See you in Athens.
See you there. Is there anything else anyone would like to ask just before we finish or say?
I was going to say, I think the beauty of your project is that principle of interdependence is quite, clearly embedded in your project. I can see how you are taking ideas from different cultures to enrich the project. So I'm seeing the promotion of intercultural learning, which helps to promote that principle of interdependence. I saw from one of your slides something that was about it takes a village to raise a child. and it kind of, resonated with me, because I come from Africa. That's one of our philosophies of life. We believe that it's the whole village's responsibility, to raise a child. And so I was very fascinated when I saw it in one of your slides, and I could hear echoes of intercultural, learning from that. And I think it's something that, if you can uphold that, that can only further enhance the project as well.
You're absolutely
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you. And at the Eden Project in Cornwall, in the west of England, they have a display, and it says, if the world were a village, and then it breaks it up into lots of different sections as to who does what and what would the different ratios and numbers be around particular things. And Tim Smith, who's the founder of the Eden Project, said just last week, it's the thing that people look at more than anything in the whole of Eden. They just stand and stare and understand the world as a village.
On
wow,
that
I
note,
just feel like sorry, Gladstone, you. I came in late, and I'm just, hurry up and send the recording, because I feel I should never have retired from teaching. I want to go back, because this is what my whole way of thinking was, going against the grain. And my father always said to me, once you shut the door, you can do whatever you like. So it was about finding that peace and harmony within my own classroom. And now you're doing it. So, I can volunteer. I can go anywhere.
We always need volunteers.
Okay.
So Sian, let us know.
I will. I'm so excited. Thank you so much. It was really, really such a pleasure listening to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
any further comments before we close? Our hearts are full, Richard. That's where you've met us, not here, here. And we congratulate you on your vision, and wish you every success for what is going to be a wonderful project, not for our kids, nor their parents, but for the whole world and for the whole communities. Inspiring. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you to you all for being here this evening. And we'll make sure that you can receive the slides and the recording. And if you want to get in touch, please do. It would be lovely to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining tonight. Bye-bye now.